So welcome to my studio. It's very nice to have you here. This piece is the one that won your prize, I'm very flattered to say. And it's a combination of different techniques, dry point, there's actually watercolour there, and pastel and crayon, and these pieces here, this gold leaf and these pieces of tissue here, put on by a process called chine collé, which is a Chinese way of adding pieces of paper, usually fine pieces of paper, into the print making process. You print on top of them, and that's how they become, so they become welded into the base piece of paper. So the base of this is a watercolour, or there's watercolour paint under there in a sort of, you can just see it coming through here in a kind of checkered pattern. And then there are other layers put in of pastel and pencil and ink. And then there's this plate and lots of small plates as well, which are called, they're dry point plates. So they're made, the lines are made by gouging into a metal plate. This is an aluminium plate, but you can do it with zinc or copper, and then rubbing the ink into this line and then printing it onto the paper. I tend to make plates and then I use them over and over in different places and for different prints. The same plate, that same line plate, appears here and again here. And I work very much in layers, putting layer upon layer, and I think about them as weaving. And these pieces were all inspired by Annie Alber's exhibition at the Tate Modern. So you can see the lines on there. There's gold lines there. That's the plate that was used there. And it's also on this one here. So it's the same plate. And also the plate that was used for those is underneath. So it's a combination of plates, layering them in, weaving them in, and then these red lines are a series of very narrow metal plates that I used. They're provoked often by external events, so often things that are actually happening in the news. I've been following quite a lot of those viscosity prints that we were looking at before were to do with things that are going on in space, planetary investigation, and quite a lot. I've done quite a bit of work about which refer, it isn't about it, but it referring to Voyager 1 when it left the solar system and it's going off into and the idea of this thing bleeping away, but no one can hear it. But it could go on for another 20 years or more, nobody really knows. It's a fascinating idea to me. Those kind of things interest me. So I found this piece of wood. A friend is a logger, and he had these slices of wood, and I wanted to use it in some way. So this is very current. I just started all of this in the last fortnight. And so I'm started to investigate a form of printing called mokuhanga, which is Japanese woodblock printing, where you use watercolour. European woodblock printer uses oil-based ink, and you roll it on to the top surface. I suppose it is like not being in control and not being obsessed by controlling or defining or saying what is what. So the situation's open. I mean, there's a word for it which is called performative, I think, where the process is completed by the spectator. So I do these things, the materials do these things, and things appear, and the final thing is completed by the viewer. much as I think on my website I said something about, I may have got rid of that bit, it was about, I think often about a play. So you have lots of different things that are going, so you've got a plate, you've got a piece of paper, you've got some ink, maybe have 2 or 3 plates, 2 or 3 pieces of paper, and they're all ingredients and they're like players in a play, and you put them together in this way, and the result is unpredictable, but it does have a structure within which something happens, and that's much like a play. So the performers have to take things up, and it's also to do with an interaction with an audience. It doesn't exist in its own little vacuum. And I suppose it's how I make it, but it's also a sort of ambition for art to be more involving and not just me telling somebody what it is. Because lots of times if people say something, I say, I mean, I know it's quite annoying to some, I don't really know, but you see these pieces here, you can see there's all sorts of I mean, it's imagery, but it's really just come from the block. I feel it's like an evolution. I'm quite excited about these at the moment because I work in this sort of evolutionary way, if you like to say. It evolves over a period of time, and my awareness of it evolves over a period of time. I have to give it lots of time. So time is quite a big thing in this. And these look quite evolutionary to me. I mean, I see them in this sort of structure. So they're sort of nestling together. My work originally was based around ideas of landscape, and I guess it probably still is, this kind of idea of sediment, of layer upon layer upon layer being built up, and sometimes uncovering that like an archaeological thing. And this is really how these prints came about. So these are layer upon layer upon layer, using that piece of wood and turning it around. Some of them are printed this way. You can just about see the underlying ones that weave that way. That's one that there's not so many layers, but still quite a lot of layers on there. And they inevitably have this landscape appearance about them, but that is what is happening. It's not something, and when it appears, I guess I run with it, but I don't set out with the idea of trying to describe a landscape. I suppose like a scientist doesn't actually discover something. I mean, it is there already, and a scientist uncovers it, or it is made apparent to him, and that's how I feel I work. I've always been a painter or artist. I've taught. I used to teach at St Martin's. I taught at St Martin's for 13 years. I ran my own residential art college on Dartmoor, and I've got a family, or had a family, they're grown up now. So I've had to be incredibly well organised to carry on that, to do all those things and keep all those balls juggling there. So I'm actually quite organised, but it is this. I'm very organised. You know, you saw my studio. You said in my studio, "Oh my goodness, it's so tiny." Well, it is, because if it isn't, if I don't have this like a kind of stage set out, so in which then I'm constantly concerned with where is something, instead of which I don't want to think about that. I just want to have the arena open, and then I can do things and things will happen. But it has to be. I think it is a bit like a laboratory, and it's that sort of. I think a research scientist would say they don't know what they're looking for. They have a kind of arena within which they're working, but lots of things can come up. And they would say they were organised. Yeah. Oh, well, that's still undecided really, so I don't actually have an exhibition coming up. I apply for various things, so I do quite a lot of open call exhibitions. Possibly just follow my Instagram account, they can see quite a lot on there, I post quite regularly. So to visit the studio to see work, it's best to either make an appointment with the artist that you want to see who's a member of East London Printmakers. We have 40 7 key holders, so quite a lot of us involved here, but we're obviously not here all at the same time, fortunately. Yes, East London Printmakers has a website and also the Instagram account that's quite lucid and clear and tells us what's going on, what news there is.